It's a stark, frigid midday in Minneapolis. The blizzard has retreated, but the cruelty hasn't. In a snow-covered suburban yard, 5-year-old Finn is dragged out by his stepfather, Silas Creed, and forced to hold out his small bare hands. A thin charging cable cracks down with a brutal smack. The child's desperate scream is swallowed by the cold wind. When Officer Elias Thorne and his K-9 Ragnar answered that 911 call, they were heading straight into a life-or-death confrontation. The moment Ragnar shattered the sunroom glass and burst out onto the snow to shield that fragile boy, the stage shifted from domestic abuse to a desperate rescue. The January blizzard had ceased its fury, but the cold remained, sharp and absolute. It was a bleak noon in Minneapolis. The sky was a vast, unforgiving expanse of pale gray, but the light was strong enough to illuminate the pristine white blanket of snow. Officer Eli Thorne, 38, navigated his patrol SUV through the slow-moving traffic of Leanin' Hills. Eli was tall and heavily built, his uniform jacket zipped high against the chill, his gray-blue eyes scanning the world with practiced vigilance. Beside him, Ragnar, his 4-year-old German Shepherd K9, sat alert, his black and silver coat thick against the cold. Unit 404, report to 512, Powderhorn Avenue. Emergency services received a direct 911 call from a neighbor, identifying extreme domestic violence, child victim. Caller reported screaming and sounds of striking. Advised immediate response. The call hit Eli like a physical blow. Child victim. Midday. 404, copy. En route to Powderhorn. He responded, activating the lights and siren. When they pulled up to the address, the contrast was jarring. A tidy middle-class home, deceptively peaceful, with snowman figures adorning the porch. Eli left Ragnar secured in the running SUV and approached the house on foot. Before he could reach the front door, a woman, Doris Hemlock, burst from the house next door. Doris, late 60s, her silver hair pulled tightly into a bun, wearing a thick, colorful knitted sweater and sturdy snow boots, ran towards Eli, her face etched with panic. "Officer, the backyard. Hurry," Doris cried, pointing a trembling mittened hand toward the side gate. "He dragged him out. I heard the boy scream. Silas is beating him." Eli didn't waste a second. He vaulted the low side gate, his heavy boots crunching through the untouched snow. He burst through the unlocked side gate and into the backyard. The scene was horrifying, starkly illuminated by the unforgiving midday light. Silas Sly Creed, the bulky 40-year-old stepfather, stood over Finn Vance, the 5-year-old boy. Finn was wearing only a thin summer-weight sweatshirt and pajama bottoms, shivering violently. His thick winter coat lay discarded in the snow near the deck. Silas held a coiled, thick USB charging cable in his hand, his face a horrifying mask of desperate, drunken fury. "Hold your hands out, you little liar. You want to know what losing money feels like? Hold them out," Silas bellowed, his voice grating and raw. Finn was sobbing uncontrollably, his small, bare hands extended, palms up toward the furious man. The skin was already red and chapped from the cold. Silas brought the thick cord down with a brutal sharp smack across the boy's open palm. Finn shrieked in searing pain. "Creed, drop the weapon. Police, get away from the child." Eli screamed, drawing his sidearm, the cold metal glinting in the pale sunlight. Silas froze, momentarily blinded by the sudden appearance of the armed officer. Eli saw his window. He slammed his hand against the button on his belt. The heavy-duty lock on the K9 compartment of the patrol SUV instantly disengaged. Ragnar seek. The command was all the German Shepherd needed. Ragnar launched himself out of the SUV, traversing the short distance in seconds. Instead of navigating the gate, Ragnar chose the most direct line to the threat, the large sliding glass door of the house's sunroom. The powerful dog hit the glass with controlled brute force. The entire glass panel shattered with a deafening crash, scattering shards of ice and glass across the deck. Ragnar, unharmed, vaulted over the debris and sprinted into the deep snow of the backyard. He planted his immense black and silver body directly between the still swaying Silas and the whimpering Finn. The K9's teeth were bared in a fierce, silent snarl directed solely at the abuser, his amber eyes burning with focus. The sight of the powerful K9 emerging from the shattered glass and snow, acting as a living, breathing shield, broke Silas's resistance. He dropped the cable. Eli tackled Silas with professional force, driving the man face-first into the cold snow. Eli swiftly cuffed the struggling man. Eli then dropped to his knees in the snow beside Finn. He ripped off his own thick patrol parka and wrapped the small, freezing body entirely. He gently pried open the boy's small hands. Both palms were marred by angry red welts and cuts from the cable. "It's okay, buddy. It's over," Eli murmured, scooping up the child. Ragnar stood guard over the cuffed Silas, his body unwavering. When the first patrol unit arrived, their lights flashing brightly in the snow, Eli transferred the secured Silas and the collected evidence, the cable and the discarded coat, to the arresting officers. He left Lorelei Vance, who was now running out of the house, screaming hysterically and accusing the officer of brutality, to face the detectives and CPS. Eli carried Finn to the awaiting ambulance. The blinding white of the Minneapolis noon had turned into the sterile, unforgiving glare of Hennepin County Medical Center's emergency room. Eli Thorne stood vigil beside the trauma bay. The immediate danger of hypothermia had passed, but Finn Vance remained utterly silent. His small 5-year-old body, now wearing a hospital gown and tucked under a blanket, seemed impossibly fragile. His gaze was fixed, not on his four-line or the medical personnel, but on Ragnar. The K9, his massive black and silver frame a strange contrast to the thin pale blue sheet on the floor, lay patiently beside the bed, his head resting lightly on his paws, his amber eyes half-closed but intensely focused. Eli had argued fiercely with the hospital administration, invoking regulations regarding K9 therapeutic support for critical child trauma cases. Dr. Amina Khan, the pediatric trauma specialist, was a woman whose late 40s carried an air of quiet, professional authority. Her dark hair was severely pulled back, and her wire-rimmed glasses only magnified the deep concentration in her eyes. She approached Eli, clipboard in hand. "The systemic hypothermia is stable, Officer Thorne. We've got him warm. But those hands." She gestured to Finn's small hands, which were now heavily bandaged with gauze and medical tape. "The bruising is severe, deep contusions consistent with repeated striking by a narrow, rigid, yet flexible object. The skin on the palms is broken in multiple places, indicating targeted intentional violence. This will require several days of observation, officer, not just for the physical trauma, but the psychological effects of being exposed to sub-zero temperatures as punishment." Eli nodded, his own guilt a dull ache in his chest. He meticulously documented the scene for Dr. Khan. He retrieved the bagged evidence, the thick USB charging cable, for the detective's formal collection. The tense silence of the trauma bay was shattered when the swinging doors burst open. Lorelei Vance rushed in, escorted by a uniformed patrol officer. Lorelei, 36, looked like a magazine cover gone wrong. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, but her expensive trench coat was spotted with mud and snow, and her beautiful face was distorted by tear streaks and desperate panic. "Finn! Oh my God, my baby!" Lorelei cried out, attempting to reach the bed. Ragnar immediately lifted his head, his black lips pulling back slightly in a silent, potent snarl. He did not move a muscle, but the warning was unmistakable. Eli quickly stepped in front of her. "Stay back, Lorelei. You need to speak with the CPS worker and Detective Cole. You are not allowed near Finn without supervision," Eli ordered, his voice flat and authoritative. "You animal! You brute!" Lorelei shrieked, her voice suddenly switching from maternal grief to raw anger. "You and your beast broke into my home. You assaulted my husband. You will pay for that glass door. This is your brutality, officer, not Silas's. Your husband was beating a 5-year-old child in the snow, forcing him to stand barefoot, striking his hands with a cable. You were inside. You are complicit, Lorelei." Eli countered, his gaze unflinching. "Your priority is not your glass door. It is the criminal charges you both face." At that moment, Detective Marcus Cole and Ms. Eleanor Hayes entered. Cole, the internal affairs detective, was imposing in his charcoal suit, his silver-streaked beard neatly trimmed, his sharp, cool eyes taking in every detail of the confrontation. Ms. Hayes, the CPS worker, was a woman in her late 20s, small and quietly determined, wearing practical winter boots and a thick wool coat. Cole immediately intercepted Lorelei, redirecting her to a private room. "Mrs. Vance, I advise you to remain calm. I am Detective Cole, and Ms. Hayes here is from Child Protective Services. We need your statement regarding the events at your residence." While Lorelei was being led away, Ms. Hayes approached Eli. "Officer Thorne, thank you for your immediate action. I've spoken with the neighbor, Doris Hemlock. She gave a full damning account. I also spoke with Miss Chloe Jenkins, Finn's kindergarten teacher, who reported multiple previous concerns." Eli handed Ms. Hayes the bag containing the charging cable. "Ms. Hayes, the abuse is chronic. Finn needs a safe haven immediately." Cole returned, his expression noncommittal. "Officer Thorne, we are proceeding with charges against Silas Creed for aggravated assault and child endangerment. Now, about your K-9's unauthorized forced entry. While the result was positive, I still have to document the use of force. Can you justify the destruction of private property and the deployment of a K-9 in a non-lethal scenario?" "Detective, the child was suffering from targeted intentional assault and critical exposure to sub-zero temperatures. Every second mattered. Ragnar bypassed the barrier to protect the victim. He used force to save a life, not to take one. I authorized the deployment because the immediate threat was visible through the window and time was critical," Eli stated firmly. Cole simply nodded, accepting the justification without comment. "CPS has placed Finn in emergency protective custody. Given the mother's lack of intervention, Finn cannot remain with her. We are seeking immediate placement." Eli looked at Finn, who was still staring at Ragnar, a thin, almost imperceptible film of tears in his eyes. He thought of his own quiet, disciplined life, his empty house in Leanan Hills. He looked at the dog, the one constant source of protection the boy seemed to trust. He made a profound decision. "Detective Cole, Ms. Hayes, I'm requesting temporary placement for Finn. I am a sworn officer. I have a secure residence, ample resources, and the child has bonded to my K-9 partner who is trained for protection and therapy. Allowing him to go to a stranger's foster home right now could compound his trauma. I pulled him out of the snow, and I intend to keep him safe until the court decides." Ms. Hayes looked at Eli, then at the massive, protective German shepherd lying patiently on the floor, and finally back at the fragile boy clinging to the dog's presence. She scribbled a note on her clipboard. "It's unconventional, Officer Thorne, but the bond is clearly stabilizing. We will process your application immediately." Eli spent the better part of the afternoon navigating the labyrinth of bureaucracy, coordinating with Ms. Eleanor Hayes from CPS to finalize the unusual temporary protective placement and providing a detailed report to Detective Marcus Cole, who, despite his outwardly meticulous cool, had quietly offered his support for Eli's K-9 deployment justification. Cole, a man whose silver-streaked beard and weary, intelligent eyes spoke of years spent watching human ugliness, had simply advised Eli, "Guard your flank, Thorne. A man like Creed doesn't fall alone, and his lawyer will target your weakest link, which is currently that boy." Cole's warning proved prophetic when a certified letter arrived moments later. The document was a blistering motion filed by Silas Creed's defense counsel. The lawyer, Vincent Graves, mid-40s, sleek and tailored, whose reputation was built on defending white-collar criminals and exploiting loopholes, argued that Eli Thorne, a stranger and a violent law enforcement agent, was utilizing his K-9 weapon to emotionally manipulate a traumatized child and illegally gain custody, citing Eli's unauthorized entry and the destruction of private property, the sunroom glass, as evidence of his unstable judgment. Eli recognized the textbook deflection strategy, making the hero look like the villain. His focus, however, was not on defending himself, but on the deeper rot surrounding Silas. Eli began tracing the financial ghost haunting Creed. Using off-duty access and favors from the department's financial crimes unit, Eli pulled a detailed, if unofficial, history on Silas Creed. The man's income, a sporadic under-the-table landscaping gig, was utterly incompatible with his high-stakes poker debts and his and Lorelei Vance's upscale powder-horn lifestyle. Eli cross-referenced the gambling losses with recent large, unexplained deposits into a joint checking account held by Lorelei and Silas. The deposits, irregular but substantial, came from a series of shell companies linked to small distressed businesses in suburban St. Paul. Eli called in a deep favor from an old contact in the neighboring district, Salazar Cruz, a veteran detective in his early 50s, thick-set with dark, perpetually tired eyes and a distinctive, neatly trimmed goatee, known for his relentless pursuit of organized crime networks. It smells like a low-level loan shark recovery scam, Eli, Cruz reported back an hour later, his voice a gravelly whisper over the secure line. Silas leans on the small business owners, likely with threats or muscle. They get desperate, take bridge loans from the wrong people. Our target, and Silas gets a cut for the heavy work. The chilling part was the link to Lorelei. Eli found evidence of wire transfers from Silas's accounts to Lorelei Vance, flagged as house maintenance or tuition fund, dating back over a year. Lorelei, who had looked away while her son was beaten, had clearly been complicit in benefiting from the illegal funds generated by Silas's desperation. Her expensive coats and her passive luxury were financed by the pain Silas inflicted on others, culminating in the terror inflicted on Finn. Eli felt a cold certainty. Lorelei Vance was not just a terrified mother. She was a willfully ignorant enabler benefiting from fraud and violence. This discovery fueled a fresh wave of protective instinct in Eli. The legal battle was secondary. His only mission was ensuring Finn never returned to that poisoned environment. After securing a preliminary meeting with his own legal counsel, a pro bono family law attorney arranged through the Police Benevolent Association, Eli drove his SUV back through the afternoon gloom to his own home in Leanan Hills. Eli's house, a modest, well-maintained two-story bungalow, was clean and highly organized, reflecting his disciplined, solitary life. A stark, almost sterile environment that now felt utterly unprepared for a 5-year-old child. He found Finn in the enclosed sunroom, which was now a small, temporary intake center, thanks to Ms. Hayes and CPS. Ms. Eleanor Hayes had been efficient and kind, setting up a cot, securing essential items, and providing a small box of toys. She was now briefing Eli, her posture weary but determined. He hasn't spoken a word, Officer Thorne. He just shivers. He won't let go of this. She gently indicated Ragnar's leash, which Finn clutched tightly, even as he slept fitfully on the cot. Ragnar, the K9, lay curled protectively at the base of the cot, a massive, comforting presence. The bond is everything right now. He views the dog as his sole protector, not you, not me. You need to leverage that trust. Eli knelt by the cot. Finn's small face was pale. His hands, swaddled in gauze, rested on Ragnar's silvery black fur. Eli gently stroked the K9's head. Ragnar's amber eyes opened, meeting Eli's gaze with a look of shared, fierce dedication. The K9 emitted a single whine, acknowledging the silent contract they had made. This child is our mission. Eli spent the evening focused solely on establishing a fragile stability. He put on his most comfortable worn flannel shirt and made a simple meal, grilled cheese, the universal comfort food, which Finn refused to touch. Eli sat patiently, reading a picture book aloud, the sound of his steady, resonant voice filling the sterile silence. He kept a respectful distance, knowing that right now he was still the uniform, the unknown stranger who had suddenly invaded the child's world, no matter how heroic the entry. The key, as Ms. Hayes had noted, was Ragnar. When Eli offered Ragnar a small piece of cheese, the dog gently nudged it toward Finn's hand. Finn's eyes tracked the movement. A tiny flicker of curiosity replaced the terror. He watched Eli's hand, then Ragnar's muzzle, and finally, tentatively, he reached for the food. It wasn't trust yet, but it was the first crack in the emotional armor, bought not by a man, but by the quiet, unshakable loyalty of a K9 after 2 nights of fitful sleep, during which Finn Vance remained physically tethered to Ragnar's leash. Eli understood that the psychological trauma ran deeper than any visible wound. The child still refused to speak, communicating only through soft shivers or sudden terrified clenches of his small bandaged hands. Tio addressed this. Miss Eleanor Hayes of CPS had arranged immediate trauma counseling, introducing Eli and Finn to Dr. Clara Hayes, no relation to the CPS worker, but possessing a similarly calm, grounded demeanor. Dr. Hayes, a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes framed by practical square glasses and dark salt and pepper hair, pulled back into a sensible braid, favored comforting, oversized wool cardigans and trousers, projecting an air of patience that seemed to absorb the frantic energy of trauma. Her approach was subtle, leaning heavily on play and expressive arts rather than demanding verbal confessions. Eli drove Finn and Ragnar across the icy, pale landscape of Minneapolis to Dr. Hayes's small, welcoming office, a space filled with the scent of clay and lavender, far removed from the cold steel of the precinct. During their first session, Ragnar was the quiet, constant presence. Dr. Hayes gently encouraged Finn to draw or build anything he felt, placing a sheet of thick white paper and a box of brightly colored crayons before him. Finn sat motionless for 20 minutes, his eyes darting between the door, Eli's face, and Ragnar's massive silent form. Finally, urged by Ragnar's soft, insistent nudge of his cold nose against the child's knee, Finn began to draw. His small, trembling fingers clutched the black crayon first. He drew rapidly, a large, sprawling, chaotic black shadow that consumed most of the page. It was a terrifying mass, thick and hostile, clearly representing Silas Creed. Eli leaned in, the short brown hair on his temple grazing the shoulder of his dark tactical fleece, and watched as Finn then selected a silver crayon, and with immense care drew a thick, unwavering line right through the center of the black chaos, culminating in a stylized protective shield around a tiny, barely there blue stick figure. The shield was unmistakable. It was Ragnar, all fierce loyalty and solid mass. His protective snarl rendered in jagged silver lines. Dr. Hayes quietly confirmed Eli's instinct. The dog is Finn's entire coping mechanism, the tangible representation of safety in a world that has betrayed him. The fragile progress of that day was shattered the moment Eli returned home. A chilling event confirmed Detective Cole's warning. Someone was watching. Parked 3 blocks away, hidden partially by a snow drift, was a black nondescript sedan, which immediately sped off when Eli's patrol SUV approached. Later, tucked into the weather stripping of Eli's front door, he found a small folded note, typewritten and devoid of identifying features, bearing a chilling single line. The custody order doesn't mean the debt is paid. It wasn't just Silas or Lorelei. It was the loan sharks, the organized element Eli and Detective Cruz were investigating, sending a clear, terrifying message. Finn was leverage, and Eli's involvement was costing them money. Eli immediately secured the note as evidence, his disciplined composure cracking slightly under the weight of this new external threat. His home, formerly a fortress of personal order, was now compromised. The decision was swift, professional, and agonizing. Finn had to be moved immediately to a non-police affiliated safe house. Eli knew exactly where to turn. Doris Hemlock, he called Doris, the elderly neighbor who had made the initial 911 call, and discreetly briefed her on the danger and the temporary custody situation. Doris, far from being frightened, embraced the request with the fierce, unflinching determination of a woman who had seen too much and was ready to fight back. "Bring that poor boy right over, Eli," she declared over the phone, her voice a comforting, steady alto, thick with a gentle Midwestern accent. "And bring that wonderful dog, too. No one messes with a child in my neighborhood." Doris Hemlock, nearly 70, was the very embodiment of resilience. Sturdy and slightly round, she wore a thick, multicolored, hand-knitted cardigan over sensible trousers and polished lace-up ankle boots, moving with the energetic briskness of someone 30 years younger. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, framing a face lined with deep empathy and a dry sense of humor. Her home, a small, meticulously kept Cape Cod cottage, was the antithesis of both Eli's disciplined sterility and Lorelei's manufactured luxury. It smelled richly of baked cinnamon and old wood, filled with comforting clutter, embroidered pillows, stacks of well-worn paperbacks, and framed photos of a life lived fully. It was a haven of genuine warmth. Eli carefully drove Finn and Ragnar to Doris's house under heavy cover, the move executed with tactical precision usually reserved for witness protection. Finn, clutching Ragnar's leash tightly, seemed marginally less terrified upon entering the cottage, the smell of baking immediately relaxing his rigid posture. As Ragnar settled onto a thick rug near the stone fireplace, his low sigh of contentment signaling his approval of the safe environment, Eli helped Doris unload a few essentials. Doris watched Finn, whose hands immediately retreated into the sleeves of his new oversized hoodie. Eli always prioritized the wrong things. Doris murmured to Eli, her eyes focused on Finn, but her voice sharp with judgment. She didn't used to be like that. Not until Silas and all his fancy promises. Eli, standing beside her, tall and imposing in his fleece, his persistent stubble lending his face a weary harshness, listened intently. She worried about the paint on her kitchen cabinets more than she worried about the bruising on Finn's legs. I've seen that boy walking alone in the yard, sitting on the steps, cold and quiet for hours, punished for what Lorelei called being messy. Silas was a monster, yes, but Lorelei, she just chose not to see. Chose her credit cards over her son's well-being. Doris's words hit Eli hard, confirming the cold reality he had discovered in the financial ledgers. Lorelei Vance was financially complicit in Silas's crimes and emotionally complicit in Finn's abuse. A willful participant in the cycle of violence and neglect that had nearly killed her son. Leaving Finn with Doris and Ragnar, Eli left the comforting warmth of the cottage to return to the cold, stark reality of the legal battlefield. The boy was safe, but the cost of his protection was rapidly climbing. The attack by Silas Creed's attorney, Vincent Graves, was gaining traction. A formal motion was filed with the Hennepin County Court accusing Eli of kidnapping, illegal surveillance, and misuse of police resources for personal gain. Eli needed ironclad evidence against Lorelei Vance to completely sever her influence, and more importantly, to demonstrate to the court